doodle. That's why we do this. I had my time on traditional radio and all the rules and regulations and assholes that I had to work for. Oh,
muzzling your creativity.
I think I've started the conversation now with my guest, Mark Giangreco. He has been on television in Chicago for a long time, and all of a sudden it was over back in January. Let's bring Mark on and see what's going on with this man who I've known for a long time. Mark, there he is.
Hey, Garry, Leslie, how you doing? Here's to bitching and moaning about management.
Woohoo!
Here's the thing. Some people would say, well, stop whining. No, we do it so you don't have to. We're your conduit to get the word out that people that run some of these businesses are assholes, and it feels good to have somebody say it, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, and the whole world has spoken for me, which I really appreciate. By the way, production value on this show is off the charts. I know.
That's all Alan and Keith, and I watched a little bit of the Oscars, and I thought, holy shit, this show on Fridays is 1,000 times better with zero of that budget.
Oh, I know. It absolutely is. So
I was going to say, this ring is our budget right here. That's the budget.
Yeah, but somebody on Twitter was watching the Oscars and said, is this like a local Emmy show? That's what it looked like.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm so proud of this show every Friday. It's a year now we've been doing the live shows, and my staff, which is all of Keith and Alan, that's it. And whatever they can put together, they do, and they bring in Todd Pickering, and then this Ryan, who has been contributing. These are all great people, so I can't thank them enough. Okay.
And all of our posters. I mean, thanks for all the comments. You guys definitely fill in the edges here.
By the way, I wish I would have known news of the future before January 28th and knew what I
Okay.
Last sportscast. So
January, a tough month for the Capitol building and Mark Giangreco. I know you've been on the interview circuit in Chicago for a few weeks now, and I don't think anybody asked you this as the first question. What are you drinking?
I am drinking La Crema Sonoma Chardonnay, also a twist top, Leslie.
Woohoo! Let's hear it for the twist top.
This is good stuff. You know, as we go through the interview, I'll be slamming vodka and doing all kinds of stuff. I got the bar right here, but
that's fine. That's why we do this. And there's the Tesla tequila, as if Elon Musk doesn't have his fingers in enough stuff.
Did you see Elon?
Ooh, this weekend, kids.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tomorrow he hosts Saturday Night Live. The only time I've looked forward to watching it in years.
Yeah. Elon Musk said, if you're going to do a scandal story about me, call it Elongate.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yes, that's what he does. I would love to get my hands on his flamethrower, and that's not code.
Yeah.
Okay. Where do we begin? Mark, I've known you for a long time, and you've been on Chicago television for 30 years, right?
40 years.
40 years.
40 years, 1982. It would have been 40 had I gone through my entire contract here. And, you know, I was also worked on The Loop with Kevin Matthews back in the glory days of radio when you were king. And, yeah, it's been a great, great run. It's been absolutely fantastic. And just wound up getting ambushed and blindsided. But, you know, it's all good right now.
I've been there, brother. Okay, let's start with this. This happened in January, and did you get a call from the TV station, or did your agent get the call, and then your agent called you? What was the chain of command there?
Well, actually, you know, I end every sportscast, I try to anyways, with a piece of funny video. And people that don't know the story, we showed this guy. He's a hockey trick shot artist, and he was combining his sport with those do-it-yourself rehab shows you see on DIY Network and so forth. So he's wallpapering and plastering his house, renovating it while skating on rollerblades with a hockey stick. Really funny, creative stuff. And I said, you know, the co-anchor and I could play a part on one of those shows. And I used a word that is not acceptable in these hypersensitive times. And so once we got off the air, our news anchor in studio, see, during COVID, the news anchors would take turns doing their shows from home. So we'd have one anchor in studio, one anchor at home. And then I was lucky enough to be able to do sports in studio. So you had no more than two people in studio. So my co-anchor in studio said, you know what? I think our other co-anchor might have been upset by that comment. you might want to call her. And I said, really? Okay. So I called, left a couple messages, nothing. The next day I got a call from my news director and my general manager. And that's how it got rolling. And eventually that got to corporate HR. And the rest is history.
So one thing completely unhinges your career there.
Yeah.
After all those, it was one thing, or did they have some body of work that they went, well, it's not just the one thing, Mark. It's been a lot of other things. Is that what they rolled out in front of you?
That's what they did. They went back to the year 2000.
Oh.
Year 2000.
Mm-hmm.
They said, you have a history of suspensions and reprimands and everything else. You have all this stuff in your file. And this is a pattern. And apparently we've had enough. To which my agent said, let's see, 2000 to 2021, you signed him to 4 or 5 year contracts. So, everything was fine. Suddenly it was unacceptable. And what I said on the air was probably the most benign thing I've ever said in my entire career. But times have changed, culture has changed. And I maintain, though, this was just a thing between two people. It had nothing to do with the general cancel culture thing. I hate using that term. It had nothing to do with racism, sexism, nothing like that. This was a situation between two people where one person got their way, the other person didn't.
When we were kids and did something wrong, say at school, the person in charge, the teacher, the principal said, this goes on your permanent record. And that turned out to be bullshit. But it looks like they actually have a permanent record on you.
Yeah. And apparently my co-anchor was maintaining a record of her own. So, I don't want to get into
I know you can't get into certain things, and I don't want to put you in that trick bag.
It's part of my settlement. I'm really not.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to some other infractions that maybe you can talk about. Let's go back. What did you do, say, 15 years ago that they didn't like?
Okay. Let's see. There's so many.
What could you, you're doing the fucking sports. What can you be doing that's that over the top?
Okay. Detroit Pistons win the NBA championship. And I showed a clip of a black and white Godzilla movie destroying downtown, throwing cars and ripping down buildings, and put up a font that said Downtown Detroit live. And I said, well, this is typical Detroit Piston fans celebrating a championship. Well, all of a sudden, we can't say anything bad about Detroit. They're our arch enemy in every sport. And some people claimed that was racist, which it was not at all, to which I produced video of white guys from Winnetka overturning cars on Rush Street when the Bulls won their first championship. So I had to apologize for that, was suspended for that. Then Don King had ripped off a bunch of young boxers in Chicago, refused to pay them. And, he was very underhanded, as we all know. And I said, well, what do you expect from a murderer? I said that on the air. His lawyers heard that, wanted me to apologize. I didn't read their apology per se. I said, okay, I apologize for calling Don King a murderer. Technically, it was manslaughter. Well, then I had to apologize for that. I suggested, half kidding, that maybe the NBA Finals might have been rigged a little bit because they always bring in Hugh Hollins to referee Game 6, and he's brutal against the Bulls. And so maybe NBC wanted to force a Game 7. I was on NBC at the time. The commissioner, the head of the network, went nuts, had to apologize for that, made fun of Aretha Franklin's weight, called her the Dairy Queen of Soul.
Wow. Okay. Now, when you get into the weight thing, now you're getting into some real politically incorrect territory these days. That doesn't fly.
Hey, that was back in the early 2000s, late 90s. So again, shouldn't have done that. But there were many, many, many issues. And of course, one that got me a 2-week suspension without pay was mocking Trump on social media, saying watching him assemble his cabinet is like the Joker recruiting the Penguin, the Riddler, and Catwoman to make Gotham great again. Well, every media person in Chicago and across the country during the last administration got to speak their mind and rip him 8 ways to Sunday. But for whatever reason, when I tried to make fun of him, then I was suspended. So I'm never going to say I was a victim. Never going to go with that. That's ridiculous. But I will say that in this particular case, I was a target.
I remember, if you want to talk about this, that situation with Walter Payton before you knew he was ill.
Yes.
And you want to talk about that?
Sure. This thing will bother me forever. I regret it to this day. Walter appeared at his son Jared's news conference where Jared was announcing he was going to play football at Miami. And Walter had lost a lot of weight. He looked very strange. And so Brad Palmer, our reporter on the scene, I called him and said, gee, Brad, you ask Walter, what's going on here? He lost so much weight. He said, I overtrained for a marathon and I was taking all kinds of diuretics and everything. And, I shouldn't have done that. Okay. I shouldn't have bought that story. That was stupid of me. But then I went on to say, oh, he looks like Gandhi. I bet I could take him in a fight. Ha, 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 ha. Well, then Walter at that time didn't want anybody to know that he was sick and eventually dying. He wasn't ready to go public with that. So then he had a news conference and, he was crying and very upset and said, God bless everyone who's supporting me, and those who want to make fun of me, God bless them too. That was directed right at me. I freaked out and went out of my mind. Oh my God. So I tried to call Walter 10 or 15 times and left messages. And then finally, a couple months later, phone rings in my office and that little voice goes, hey, you're a hard guy to get a hold of. And it's Walter calling me to say, hey man, I lied to you. You didn't know. I forgive you. And at this point, he knew he was dying. And he went out of his way to call me to forgive me and say, don't worry about it.
That's cool.
Absolutely incredible. But again, I regret having said that. That's the biggest regret I have in my entire career. And people still bring it up today. And I have to live with it.
Are there other incidents of people that you plowed into and had to deal with them off air that you got confronted with and you had to back down or apologize or anything like that?
Well, Mike Ditka hated me. I remember during those wars when Steve McMichael, God bless him, we pray for a miracle for Steve. When I was doing Sports Sunday with him at NBC, Ditka was on CBS with Johnny Morris, and both McMichael and Ditka were both hammered on Sunday night after the game. So we actually put a monitor up on the set live on Channel 5 and watched Ditka live on Channel 2 where Johnny's trying to get him on track because he's so drunk and going on a rant. And McMichael's making fun of Ditka. I mean, who would ever do that today on live television? But I always made fun of Mike because my thing was the guy's a football coach. Come on. It's out of control how he is thought to be a god. He's not the Pope. He's not the president. I mean, let's just have some fun with this. Well, Ditka was very thin-skinned. He didn't like me personally at all. So we would go back and forth, and he would always take shots at me in person and on the air. But, I mean, I never got in a fight with him. But back in the day, in the locker room, we would get in fights with the competition, a lot of cameras pushing and shoving, and it was viciously competitive back then. So I've been in a few dust-ups with competing reporters, which is wild.
We had the privilege and fun of working in media in the 80s.
Yep.
And it seems since, say, the late 90s, now all the fun has been sucked out of a lot of these radio stations and TV stations, but we were there. So we can say we had an incredible time because everything was going. There was percussion and fizz and everybody's having a good time and the audience was drawn in and they're having a good time. And it's no secret that when you watch it now, it's a shadow of itself because they have kneecapped a lot of it.
It's homogenized, sanitized. It's protecting the brand. It's just really generic vanilla. Yeah, we worked in the Wild Wild West days where we got away with murder. People appreciated the creativity. Now, again, the super hypersensitive time that we live in. And by the way, the comment I made that cost me my job, in this day and age, it's a word you shouldn't use. And I was fully prepared to make a sincere apology. It's just that that person I thought would have just come to me after the show. We would have worked it out between us. But that was not the case. So I just wanted to make that clear that I wasn't blowing off the comment. But I certainly don't think it deserved termination. But back then, gosh, I remember when I was doing Kevin Matthews' show, doing sports in the morning with Jim Shorts, which was wonderful, and listening to you and Steve and Brand Meier and everybody else. The Loop was one of the greatest stations in the country. And I come from a radio background where all I ever wanted to be was a top 40 rock jock. And when I was 8 years old in Buffalo, New York, listening to my little transistor in bed, when you could get all the radio stations at night with a direct signal, I listened to music radio, WLS, Super CFL, Larry Lujak, Dr. Brock, Dick Biondi, John Records Landecker. So radio is all I cared about. I just kind of fell into TV. But we got away with murder back then, and it was the most entertaining murder ever.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's tighter than Tupperware. You can't do shit on any of these stations. Let me throw this at you, because this is my observation of where you worked. It looks to me as if in the last few years, they've decided they want to get rid of all their longtime people that have the biggest contracts, because systematically all those people are now gone. And you told me, and you can tell me if you want to expand on this, about contract talks. When you would go in during contract renewal, it wasn't a matter of negotiating. It was them telling you, this is going to happen, no negotiating, take it or leave it, right?
Absolutely correct. But you got to understand the climate right now. Local television news is suffering. It's so challenged. It's going the way of newspapers, can't compete with social media. There's so many other social media platforms. Local TV news is really struggling. Revenue is probably off 50% now across most markets. So the ratings are down, the revenue is down. So they've had to cut salaries. And, and back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, anchors are making millions and millions of dollars. I have to tell you that I had been taking pay cuts since 2008 and never completed that 5-year deal, to where they had to get a haircut, as they said, and they kept cutting back salaries. They cut everybody in half last time around because the revenue is just not there anymore, and people have other choices. So I completely understand that. I get it. But now I think it's gotten to the point where they still think certain people are making too much money, and if they appear to be a problem, or if they're up in age, although I can't really claim that, and I'm not going to get into old age discrimination thing and all that. I think that most corporations within media and outside media are looking for any way they can cut staff and salary, and this particular incident, I think, gave corporate that opportunity. But again, we settled. Everything's fine. I'm glad I'm out, moving on, trying to be positive. I'll never, ever forgive or forget why I was run out, how I was run out, and especially by whom. But I think I can compartmentalize and move on and really enjoy a whole new life. I have some great options. But to hold that grudge forever over on the side, I mean, I think hey, I can do both.
Okay, I understand economics in this business, but a lot of these places seem to be run like a clubhouse. It's not a business. It's a weird clubhouse atmosphere where the person in charge wants to bring in a friend or whatever. And there's that involvement where they will gut the business to do something that makes no sense. I've been the victim of that a few times, where I'm on this is my little story on where you're at here. I come into the radio station, the last radio station I worked at one day, and a colleague comes into my office. Hey, sorry to hear you're not on the show anymore. And I go, what are you talking about? Well, they just sent out a press release. They're taking you off the afternoon show. I go, nobody told me that. I mean, this is the insanity. It's their station. They can do whatever they want. But I refuse to be treated like dog shit. That's not acceptable. Yeah. I don't get that part of it at all. And I've been treated like this a couple times for no reason. I'm not that crazy, and I don't know what people have read. But this is what, and you're the victim of this too. So it's not just me. It goes on all over the place.
Yeah, I don't agree with that management wants to bring in their friends. And that happened to you a couple of times, I know, but not to me. I think in my particular case, this is about cutting staff and cutting salaries. And now, hey, I started in Dayton, Ohio, went to Louisville, Kentucky before I got a shot at Chicago. And I was lucky to have 3 stops. Most people have 4, 5, 6 stops before they can make it to the quote unquote big time. Now the policy is hire some kid right out of college, 21 years old, make them shoot the story on their phone, do an interview, slap some music and some nat sound on there. There's no writing involved. There's no track. There's no stand-up camera shot. And just throw that stuff on the air and pay him 33 grand a year. That's basically what the reporting staff is coming down to on local television. So I don't think it's bringing in the cronies and the buddies in my particular case, or in television's case. It's let's just bring in some kids, pay them nothing, burn them out after a couple of years, and just bring in a fresh batch of 21-year-olds after that. So real journalists who are seasoned, who have a lot of experience, I fear for them. I fear for all the great news reporters out there on the street in Chicago whose jobs are in jeopardy and will be replaced by some kid with a backpack, a satellite dish on his head with a...
Yeah, it looks like it. They're going to cut it into the bone. They're going into the bone. I understand you have to cut, but now they're in the bone, and good luck with that. If you had your choice right now, would you want to go back to, you have a choice. You don't have to stay off of any other station if you want to go to work, right? You could go to work.
Yeah, I got to tell you, very lucky, honored, and flattered. I've had a couple of really nice offers from other TV stations and radio stations. And I tell you, Garrett, if this happened to me 2 or 3 years ago, I would have jumped to the competition 2 months ago, 3 months ago. I don't have a non-compete clause, which is kind of insulting because they not only fired me, but they figure, well, he's no threat if he goes anywhere else, so let him go ahead. If it happened 2 or 3 years ago, I think I would have been working at another station by now and putting all my energy into it. But hey, I'm 69 years old, and I've got grandkids, and I've got a lot of other interests. And I had a great 40-year run in Chicago, probably a 50-plus year run in radio and television overall. And so why not try to do something different? But there's that little part of me that says, well, you know, if you're getting offers, you ought to take some people up on it. So I'm still going back and forth on that. But the nature of the business and the fact that I really had a good career and that other people have spoken up for me and I don't have to justify anything, I could put a bow on this and wrap it up. So I'm kind of in the middle right now. I'm trying to decide the way I want to go. But if I never return to media ever again, that's cool.
Had you run this contract through its natural end, that would have been your retirement anyway, right?
Yeah. In a year and a half, I would have been 70 years old. And yeah, that's when I was going to hang it up. And by then, I used to joke that, you know, the studio could be a car wash by then. Who knows what's going to happen to all the television stations? You know, small market mom and pop TV stations are selling their broadband width and just shutting down the whole operation. And, you know, look, I don't want to be some old curmudgeon and whine about the good old days. I mean, it's progress, things happen, everything changes, but, you know, you just have to adapt. And like I say, it'll never be like the 80s again.
No, I feel sorry for these people coming in now because it was good at one point it was super good. It was incredibly fun.
Yeah.
And we got to taste that. Let me ask you this. So they paid your contract out, and are you muzzled till the natural end of that? And then you can say whatever about all this, or is that forever?
That's a good question. I have to read the fine print to see if it's in perpetuity, because my deal would have been up September 30th, 2022. After that date, if I can just go on a rampage, I'll call you back. We could do another show.
There you go. I asked that, Mark, because when I got pulled from WGN Radio, I had a year to go on my contract, and they paid me wasn't that nice of them? They were so ethical to pay out a contract. Like they were doing me a favor. You signed a contract. Anyway,
yeah.
They said I can't say anything bad about the station while they're paying me for that year that was coming up. And I'm thinking, well, if your decision was so sound and you're so happy with it, why don't you want people to talk about it? That's the weird, funny part to me.
I'm assuming that once my deal would have been up on that date, then I'm free to say whatever I want. By then, maybe I'll just say that.
Yeah, at that point, you're probably not even going to give a shit about it.
But you know, hold a grudge. You know that. So
yeah, okay. Let's switch into sports here. I never really talk about sports, but because of COVID, and we're starting to emerge, and there's your shorts, your short sports shorts.
By the way, I'm not wearing any pants right now.
That a boy.
Just in
that a boy. That was your fourth infraction 8 years ago. Okay. What about sports? Do you think people, when the arenas open up, you think they're going to go back? pre-COVID numbers? What is your feel? What are you hearing?
Well, as far as attendance goes, people are dying to get out. They'll pack the arenas and the ballparks and stadiums, no question. I think people are they're going out of their minds. They can't wait to be in a crowd, although, everybody's going to have to be vaccinated. And I think all the precautions should stay in place forever. Sanitizers everywhere in every public place. And yeah, wear a mask. Go ahead. Why not? What's the problem with wearing a mask? I don't get it. And infringing on your freedom, that makes no sense to me. If you want to remember years ago, you get on a plane and somebody be wearing a mask and you'd say, look at this weirdo.
Yeah.
What's their problem? So what's the problem with that? I have no problem with that at all. I think the stadiums, ballparks, and arenas are going to be full. But I also believe that if you're a sports reporter, forget it. It's over for you. We're never going to be in a locker room again. I can almost guarantee that. I'd be shocked and surprised. The pandemic has just accelerated the inevitable. It's going to be Zoom interviews continuing past the pandemic. Pre-game, post-game, there'll all be Zoom interviews. No one will be allowed in the locker room. They might have a news conference room where a manager, coach, player would go to the podium. Again, sterilized, sanitized, homogenized, all about the branding. Everything's controlled environment. You're never going to get a one-on-one. You're never going to get a player to really loosen up and tell it like it is. And every single league, team, university, they have their own media departments now. They shoot their own stuff, do their own interviews, produce the hell out of it. Really nice, beautiful features. But obviously, if there's a scandal involving a player or the team or the league or whatever, they're never going to touch it. So that's dangerous in and of itself. And that's what's happening in news. Forget about sports. That's happening in news where they have pool cameras now for news conferences with the mayor and so forth. That's going to stay the way it is. And so everybody's going to have the same video. Everyone's going to have the exact same soundbite. That's the way it is right now. I think that's going to continue. And we, media people, are going to have no access. The access is going to be limited even more. Hey, we're there to investigate, to call people out, to make fun of people, but moreover, to challenge and question what's going on. Teams, owners, they're going to have even more free reign to control their brand the way things are going now.
What about sports becoming a social justice platform where players now are using the field as a way to protest and get their views out on things? What's your feeling on that?
I'm all for it. I'm not one of these shut up and dribble. I hated that. I wanted to crawl through the television. Players nowadays are socially and culturally aware, much more so than in years past. I want to hear from them. I think they should use that platform. Whether you agree or disagree, I think it should be out there and we should have a discussion about it. I am all for that, 100%. What I do worry about is that people are drifting away from conventional sports. Like, now that I'm a civilian, I haven't watched a full game or event of any sport for 3 months, just cleansing my brain, which feels good. I have other interests. And, take baseball, for example. I think I'm a baby boomer with a millennial's, attention.
The dog agrees with you.
Yeah. I can't watch more than 2 innings of baseball. It's inane. It's the slowest, most boring thing in the world. And when you're stuck in Chicago, what's happening here? Cubs are going nowhere. If the White Sox do like they're supposed to, in spite of all their injuries, only half the town cares. That always bothered me. Nobody really, they're always the second team. Bulls are unwatchable. Can't watch the NBA. Blackhawks, I love hockey. They're out. I mean, there's nothing to look forward to. The Bears come up with this big move that surprised everybody. They get Justin Fields. Oh, my God, this is fantastic. But leave it to that franchise. This guy seems like a sure bet, a great, great quarterback, just the kind of guy that Matt Nagy always wanted. But leave it to the Bears to screw him up, too.
Okay, great. Okay, I want to go back to that question I asked about what do you think of these athletes that are doing the protesting on the field. I'm such a simpleton. I'm going to some of these things to get away from all this. Yeah. And I think sports was in that category, and award shows. I think a lot of people wanted to escape from all this, and maybe that's a naive way to go in today's world. But I just think at this point, we are looking for these comfort zones, and sports was always that to me. And I know that's a good platform because it got a lot of people looking at it, and that's when you want to make your message happen. So I guess it gets caught in that, and I'm not in the mindset of what they're protesting. It's not my history of being oppressed and everything, so I don't understand it entirely that way. I understand that, but
I completely understand your position. I get it 100%, and I think everything in moderation. I think you have to earn the right to use that platform. I mean, look at Kyrie Irving of the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, he's a very bright guy, super talented basketball player, but he's a strange dude, and he's got all kinds of weird stuff banging around in his head, and he's boycotting the media, and he's having issues with this and that. And, you know, it gets to a point where enough is enough. You know, at the end of the day, you're an entertainer and you're an athlete. I think anything in moderation. I'm all for athletes speaking their mind on social issues, politics, state of our country, culture, everything else. But there has to be a limit to it. And once you're on the field, the court, the ice, whatever, entertain me, play your heart out. And yeah, it is an escape for most people. See, for me, my perspective is different. Sports has been my job forever, since I was 19 years old. My first job was in college. And, you know, for everybody else, it's an escape from their job. So that's why I have a different perspective.
right.
I can listen to people protesting, you know, as that have that forum. But I get, you know, you're going to work every day and you come home, you want to sit down and watch the ball game. You don't want to.
Yeah.
I totally get that.
Yeah. All right. Well, Mark, a toast to you and to the rest of your life on whatever you do.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. I love this show. This is an awesome concept. And I've approached about doing a podcast and doing terrestrial radio, and maybe I'll go back to ESPN radio for a bit here in Chicago. You know, I think my TV days are done unless I could do a muscle car hot rod show. You know, I love cars. By the way, I do have that 1957 Thunderbird. I still have it.
Oh, Kellyanne had her schnauzer in it, she said.
Yeah, it's my Restomod hot rod show car. We won plenty of awards with that, and now I'm driving the heck out of it. And I love going to those car auctions, and I'm obsessed with cars, music, radio, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, I'm obsessed with coin diving, kite surfing, and magnet fishing. Those are my loves. Look at that. There's a magnet fish thing right there. All right, Mark, good to talk to you.
Thank you, man. Really.
All right.
It was like old school flashback Friday of the great days of radio.
Yes. Yes, it is. Thanks, Mark.
See ya.
All right. Well, there it is.